everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Crime Chronicles. I'm here with Mark Jones, and I am Keone. We're going to show an episode of the first episode that we filmed and recorded, and then we're going to talk about it afterwards. But Mark, go ahead and introduce yourself. This is the first show, so we're going to go ahead and let everybody know a little bit of your background and why we're doing Crime Chronicles.
Well, I just hope people realize they're witnessing history here and remember where you were when you saw this podcast. I have a PhD in criminal justice. I also have a master's of criminal justice. I've been a professor of criminal justice for more years than I can count now, and pretty much my adult life has been spent studying and/or working in the criminal justice system. And this is pretty simple. John knew this was my area of expertise and an area of interest, and it was of interest to him. And so we decided, why not? And the cases we picked, we'll talk about why we picked this case first, after you see the nice, slickly done production here. And it is very well done. I can't take credit for that. John and some other people take credit for that. So, but I hope you enjoy it. I mean, I've had fun doing it.
Well, they get better, and we've recorded so many episodes already. They're all being edited, but Mark is going to bring cases from all over the country, and we've got cases where Mark has been in Rome and other countries and has done some great recording, and we've put some great episodes together. But so we'll stop running our mouths for a second, and let's just get into the episode. Guys, stick around, because after the episode, we will be talking about it. All right.
There is nothing a parent fears more than the disappearance of their child. There is nothing society fears more or loathes more than a person who would kill a child. In this segment, we take a look at the disappearance and the murder of 9-year-old Amber Hagerman in Arlington, Texas, and it happened in a parking lot like this one. It gave birth to something we all know very well when we pass down highways and see it, the Amber Alert system. Now, the Amber Alert system is an acronym, but it was based on an actual case that occurred in Arlington, Texas. So in this segment, we take a look at the murder and unsolved mystery surrounding the death of Amber Hagerman. Well, that brings us to what happened. Amber Hagerman, 9 years old, and her 5-year-old brother Ricky, along with their parents, were visiting the child's grandparents in Arlington, Texas. Now, they wanted to go bike riding, which they had done many times. And the grandmother said, fine, go ahead, but don't get farther than 1 block away from the house. Well, typical children, they disobeyed, and they went 2 blocks away from the house and wound up in the Winn-Dixie parking lot. Younger brother Ricky, growing a bit scared that he disobeyed his parents' wishes, decided to go home. He pedals home to his grandparents' house, tells his parents that Amber is still in the parking lot. The parents tell Ricky to go back and fetch their daughter and bring her home. Ricky goes back to the parking lot. Amber's nowhere to be seen. So he pedals back home and tells his parents. Now they're upset. The parents get in their car, drive to the Winn-Dixie parking lot. Amber's bike is there, but no sign of Amber. But the police are already there. An elderly man, Jim Kelvin, had seen what had happened, but was unable to prevent what happened. Turns out that he saw a young man grab Amber, force her into a dark pickup truck, and take off. So word gets out to Dallas media outlets that Amber Hagerman is missing, And so the search commences. Unfortunately, Amber's body is found nude 4 days later. Well, the evidence and circumstances suggested that Amber Hagerman's murder was unplanned. Her killer was never found, but the reaction of the Dallas government was swift and immediate. It created something locally called the Amber Alert System, which required law enforcement to notify the media in the event of a disappearance of a small child. The Amber Alert System in Dallas is credited with saving one child's life, and so the federal government decided to follow suit. Many states and the federal government adopted their own Amber Alert system. How effective are Amber Alert systems? That's a question we'll look at in this segment also. But the question still remains, who killed Amber Hagerman and why? And are Amber Alert systems effective?
Sorry. All right. So that's one of our first episodes. It's shorter than some of the ones that's coming up. Some of these are going to be short and sweet, and some of these are going to be pretty lengthy because we want to do have some conversation after we give everybody a little background on the cases that we're talking about. So, Mark, why did you pick this one as the first case for us to talk about?
Well, John, I was telling you before we came on, this was really coincidental timing here. I think we recorded several episodes, or what you saw episodes last summer, and I did some last fall of my own, and I just left it to you to pick the first topic, and you picked this one. And how coincidental it was, and this in a very perverse way. I did not realize that coming up on this, January 13th was Amber Hagerman Day declared by the federal government. It was the day that she disappeared. I also didn't realize that January 17th was the day her body was found. That was totally unplanned. So as far as why I picked it, it's because of the relevance of the Amber Alert system. And I guess I'm one of those people that study criminal justice are, I guess we're a tad bit like people that slow down to look at wrecks but don't get out and help, but we study. And I don't mean to make light. This is a horrible case.
No,
every parent's worst nightmare.
I get what you're saying.
But it's up to some people to study these things, and for better or worse, and what comes of them affects all of us.
You know what? What you were just saying, that's crazy because I didn't think about it until you just said it earlier. I had asked you, did you do a promo on your Instagram? And I had asked you that for a couple of days, and then when you finally did it, that was around the 13th. And then this episode, wow, it's crazy how those two dates correlate.
Well, actually, I did it and gave it to you, and you put it on your Instagram, and I didn't put the promo on my Facebook page, but I put anyhow. Yes, it was coincidental there.
Okay, so just to be clear, the person that abducted Amber Hagerman was never
caught. And if you do a Google search like I did with this, you'll find that occasionally there are efforts made to kind of reopen the case, do a cold case investigation, things like that. And I believe there were some students in Virginia. I'm not sure how Arlington, Virginia got involved in this, who were vowing to catch the person that did it, that type of thing. But long story short, no, this is 1996, I think it was. So you're talking about a case that's like 27 years old. So it's very unlikely they'll ever catch this person. And on top of that, is in my estimation, it's just my estimation, the chances are the person that did this was not local to that area and or may have moved on. People that do those kind of crimes very often don't stay in one place too long. If the person is still alive, I doubt he'll ever be caught.
Yeah, and if certain evidence isn't kept, like we've all learned from watching things like Forensic Files, that they can locate people off of the smallest detail. A van fiber left by the bicycle at the scene of the crime. But when that happened, there was probably no one looking for those items or having the wherewithal to canvass the area for those types of items. So,
well, I don't know that may be true, but I don't know if that was the case or if there just simply was not enough there, because by the accounts, this man who witnessed the abduction, but who was too far away or powerless to stop it, he saw, I believe a pickup truck, I believe, but more than likely, the guy just pulled little Amber inside his truck and took off. Was never seen again, and no physical evidence was left other than her bicycle. Now, of course, not to get too graphic here, but what physical evidence was discovered on her body, and I'm sure there was some, but apparently wasn't really enough. And although they can do a lot of things with technology, still a lot of cases go unsolved, particularly when it's very unlikely that the victim had any kind of connection to the person.
Not only the victim not having connection to the person, but like you were saying, this is probably a person that doesn't live in the area, because if they saw that vehicle, chances are you'd see it again. But there's also the chance of sometimes, again, watch a lot of forensic files. When they pick out a vehicle, it may be in abundance in that area,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's like saying, hey, they were in LA and they drove a Tesla. Well, good luck.
Well, this. You're talking about pickup trucks in Texas.
Right.
Okay,
So,
and I lived in Texas and I drove a truck, so I know of
yeah.
what I speak.
Eight years in Texas. I didn't drive a truck, but I seen plenty of them. So that's why I gave the analogy of driving a Tesla in LA. It's like there are certain cars that are in abundance in places, and so that could make that extremely hard. You need a lot more detail um, than that. That goes to, people will say a lot that I'll hear people, because we look at everything nostalgically, right? Back when I was growing up, you could just wander around as a kid and you were totally
Oh
safe.
yeah,
And I'm like,
everything was better. Yeah,
yeah,
right.
I'm like, that's not true. It's just you didn't hear about a kid being kidnapped in Kansas when you lived in Florida back in 1970. Okay.
There has one of the things that I'm going to dispel, John,
Mhm.
as we go through this, and I say to people all the time, is that there never was a golden age of criminal justice. There never was a period when we were totally free of the fear of crime. The thing about this case, though, and I guess now we should kind of move into the aftermath. Now, what's happened as a result of this? Now, this is where I put on my glasses. Going to have to read something, okay? As I said in the video, AMBER is an acronym, and I never can remember the exact acronym. AMBER stands for America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response, and it just happens to coincide with the name AMBER. All right, and so as was stated, this started in Texas, started in Dallas actually, and then states start to adopt their own Amber Alert systems, and the federal government takes over the Amber Alert system, I believe, in 2003. So now it's nationwide. Hawaii was the last state to really buy into this.
Mhm.
The question is, though, is that and by the way, I'm not one of those academics who just simply tears down what people in the professional world do. That's what a lot of academics do, is sit back and criticize. So I'm not suggesting that this be dismantled. I'm not saying that I'm not
Mhm.
impugning anyone's motives, anything like that. But there is a question to be raised about what are the side effects of Amber Alerts, and does it do what it's supposed to do? All right. And the answer there is, according to some evidence, although the federal government, and this is the way the federal government does, and the way law enforcement does, claims that Amber Alerts have saved X thousand number of children. All right, you got to examine some things. First off, what this is an example of, this is an extreme rarity here, where a child is abducted by a stranger and murdered and raped in this way, sexually assaulted in this way. Most child abductions are done by someone known to the child. And more often than not, these Amber Alerts you see, the person who quote unquote abducted the child, very often is a child custody dispute is at the root of this. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, the child's recovered, an Amber Alert was put out, therefore Amber saved this child's life. And that's probably not the case. This parent, this aggrieved parent, while probably in violation of some protective order or something like that, or some custody order, was probably not going to harm the child. Sometimes these things are done out of spite by an ex-spouse or an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend. And so a lot of cases where the child is returned safe, has nothing to do with the Amber Alert saving the child. It has to do with just police work, or just the person never really intended any harm in the first place.
Something important to what you said, and I know people who have watched some of my other shows have heard me say this before. It's one of the reasons why I wasn't a big fan of To Catch a Predator, not because they were exposing pedophiles, but it was just giving the illusion that people who were always harming children was some stranger lurking in a basement on the internet. Which,
Absolutely.
yes, that does happen, but a lot of criminal justice people, a lot of people who study crime, a lot of detectives, a lot of officers have said a lot of people who are doing that on a computer are either too scared or unwilling to actually meet that underage person in person. Not to say that it never happens.
Right.
And every psychologist that I've talked to will tell you 8 times out of 10, when a child is abducted, like you said, or sexually assaulted or molested, it's someone who knows the family, a family member, a friend of the family, a neighbor. And that's why I never really liked that show, because people stopped looking in
Yeah.
their own vicinity and they were looking for the protect your kids from these strangers. And Samuel just said, all these years I've been getting Amber Alerts and never knew it was an acronym. Very interesting. I didn't either. I thought Amber Alert, they just named it after her, like they do with laws sometimes. Mark
Well, it
Young,
turns out it was both. So yeah,
mhm,
but it was both.
they found an acronym that fit her
Right.
name, but I just never thought of it as an acronym. So speak to that a little bit, because you said, although you kind of did already, you said, it's a lot of times it's someone who knew the family or is a family member.
Well, this is an example of what I call, first off, two things, and you kind of alluded to it just now, although you didn't use this exact phrase. Sometimes called crime control theater. And while
Mm,
the to catch a predator, the things you talked about, that makes for great theater. How much is it reflective of real life and real issues concerning crime? Not very
mm,
much. It's also sometimes called an example of kind of making policy backward, because we generate policy and create things like Amber Alerts based on highly exceptional cases. The person who is like, you take the Amber Hagerman case, for example. All right, the guy who did that, would he have spared her life if he had been riding along and saw an Amber Alert? No. In fact, first off, her body was found 4 miles from where she disappeared. He wasn't driving down the interstate or anything like that. There wasn't time for an Amber Alert to even be effective. But quite frankly, he would have killed her anyway. Um, Also, sometimes with Amber Alerts, you are doing if the person really is a predator, a harmful predator, you are doing them a favor by broadcasting this, because you're broadcasting this information not just to the public but also to the abductor. There was a case, I believe, in I want to say Louisiana, Missouri, I'm not sure, in which that very thing happened. And first off, and sometimes the quote unquote child who's been abducted is a willing participant in this. It may be an older teenager who is abducting, quote, either violently or non violently, a complicit teenage girl, for example. And this guy, when he saw the Amber Alerts, he made his car look different, for lack of a better phrase. He painted the car, things like that, and so the car wouldn't be recognizable. So sometimes you play into the hands of these people, but usually, if a person, in those rare instances where a person is really determined to harm a child, they're going to do so right away. They're not going to. It's not going to take days. It's going to be a matter of a few minutes or a couple of hours. Amber Hagerman was most likely, unfortunately, probably dead within a few hours of being abducted.
jeez, man. Yeah, and you just said it. I just thought about it. If the abductor is driving and sees the alert, that might put them into panic mode and
Yeah.
inherent.
And that's been said too. Is that it
Mhm.
may now personally, I don't. As far as the panic mode, is that going
Mhm.
to send a person over their edge? I kind of doubt that. I
No,
think,
but it's like the jig is up kind of thing.
yeah.
Because when you
But
said in the when you
no, go
said
ahead.
in the
Sorry.
beginning, no, you're fine, because there's a little delay sometimes. When we were talking about, and I know this isn't the Amber Hagerman case, but we're kind of just making comparisons with the Catch a Predator and all of that. And what you said is true about crime theater, because when you go and you watch the behind the scenes and get all this information, for every one person they caught, there's like 15 who never showed up
Oh, absolutely.
or never there's so they caught 200 people, but 2,000 was like, yeah, I'm not coming.
Well, and the other thing to consider here. Now, I know, I believe I said at the outset of this very well produced video, and I can say that because I didn't do it. Um,
Thank you for
that,
giving Keone, even though you called me John 17 times. Thank you for giving.
okay, Keone. How's that? All right. Um, and I was really talking about Martin, not you, anyway.
Oh, that's right. My bad.
uh, but I believe I said at the outset that there's really nothing lower or something like that
Mhm.
than a person that kills little children.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So you don't feel sorry for people like that. You can't.
No.
All right.
At all. Right.
But remember, in a lot of these cases, most of these Amber Alert cases, very often it's a parent in a custody dispute. All right. Now you have put the label of child
Mhm.
abductor on this person who has taken the child, perhaps illegally, but perhaps it's something. It may be a violation of some civil protective order or custody battle, but not necessarily a crime like child kidnapping. All right. So now this person has got this label of child abductor on them, and the whole public knows it. And on top of that, you have compromised the privacy of this child and their family. And one of the things that our justice system, one of the hallmarks is protecting the confidentiality, the privacy of children who are victims of crime. But now it's been broadcast to the world. Okay,
Yeah,
my daughter was a child sex
we're
victim or something like that.
adding to the trauma. And what you just said, child abductor, because we talked about this before. Sometimes the label, and again, me and Mark aren't saying these labels shouldn't be there. We know when it's put on certain people, they need to be alerted, the community,
Absolutely.
that this person's a child abductor, or they're in, according to Megan's Law and all of those things. But you talk about the cases where it's a 17-year-old dating a 16-year-old when they were in high school, and now he's 19 and she's 17. The father doesn't like him anymore, and now this kid gets in trouble and he's slapped with some type of uh, label on him. Same thing with a child abductor. If it's a parent we've seen parents that were taking a kid out of a harmful situation because the court wouldn't, and that parent got fed up. We're not saying that's all the time that happens, but it happens both ways. And now this person is labeled child abductor. And when you're labeled child abductor, no one asks you, hey, how did you get that label? They just know you're a child abductor.
That's the ultimate scarlet letter in today's society.
Yeah.
Is being a child sex offender.
Oh,
And
yeah.
another thing that, and again, I don't mean to totally run the thing down. I'm not saying do away with anything like that. I'm just saying,
We're just
whatever
nuances.
you take this with a grain of salt, all right?
Right.
And Amber has its limits and perhaps some areas where it needs to be improved. For example, I would say, and some law enforcement agencies may do this, but then again, they get in trouble if they employ too much discretion and something bad happens, even not as an unintended result of that. But when people see an Amber Alert, one unfortunate side of that is that they flood police departments with calls.
Yes.
Hey, the kid was abducted and seen in a white crossover or a black pickup or what have you. All right. Well, everyone who sees a black pickup or white crossover calls the cops, and well-meaning people call in with these tips, and it's a waste of police officers' resources and time. When if they were doing it the old-fashioned way, perhaps it'd be a lot more efficient. Now, you know how on TV and the movies, when the detective asks people questions and the person says, oh, by the way, there was one more thing. It's probably not important, but I'll tell you anyway. Oh, of course,
Yeah.
that's the thing that cracks the case, right? All right.
Right.
But
That's
but
every
that's not,
Mark. That's every Law and Order Special Victims Unit.
and I never watched. I remember, but back in the '70s, this is my era now. But I'm talking about Columbo. Just one more thing.
Hey! Wait!
Yeah.
Wait! There are some things that are sacred to me. You can make fun of Kojak, but don't you dare point out any inefficiencies with Columbo.
I'm not making fun of Kojak or Columbo. In fact, somebody said in my Facebook announcement, I look like Kojak. I
Telly
think
Savalas.
I think it's not. Well, I think it's more of an Inspector Gadget or a Clouseau vibe myself, but I don't know. But anyway, some tips, if you will, indeed are useless. And again, I'm not impugning the motives of anybody here. On the other hand, though, now the Amber Alert system, it is now under the control of the federal government, and it is now a federal government behemoth, all right, which dare not be assaulted. And plus, I can sit here and say this because I'm not running for office. Okay, no one is going to run for office and say, "Hey, I think we need to reform the Amber Alert system and make it easy." No, nobody's going to say.
Oh, your opponents would have a field day with that because no one would be understanding what you're even talking about.
Right? Yeah.
You're not going to break down the ins and outs of. Even you can put up all the supporting data that you'd like, and that would go in one ear and out the other. And I know why. We're not saying dumping.
Oh
on
yeah.
people.
Well, look, we know we're in an election year, and we know that there's no such thing as nuance in political discussions. All right. And that's the way it goes here. And plus, I'm not saying that a whole lot of harm is being done with Amber Alerts, although in some cases it probably is. I'm just saying it's not doing as much good as people may think it does.
So Lisette, here's the thing right here. Look,
Here come the
Lisette
glasses
says,
again. Good.
I thought my daughter was abducted, but she was at the neighbor's house when she couldn't get in the house because I came home late. It was a miserable feeling looking for her. Imagine if I don't know the ins and outs of. I know it's different in every precinct. Sorry, every precinct, every area, every city, every state of how long a person has to be missing before they take action. It's different everywhere. It's not. It's not the same across the board.
Right. Yeah. Well, and like you said, I don't know either, and it does differ
Hmm.
from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not so much a practice of law, a matter of
Hmm.
law, as it is just practice that particular agency. Look what Lisette just mentioned. I've been through that. There was one Sunday morning. Long story short, we couldn't find my 5-year-old son, and believe me, it was no fun. All right. But it also leads me to another point. I'm glad you brought that up. All right, because in this article that I read, okay, they talk about, I forget what state this was in, but they start off by talking about how a father was missing his daughter's 3-year-old daughter. He called 911. Amber Alert was notified. All this good, and the Amber Alert system worked to a T. Okay, everything went well. One hitch though, the daughter was never abducted. The daughter was at home hiding behind an air conditioner and never even disappeared. And yet somehow that was claimed as an Amber Alert success. So it's the old saying, and I hate to use the word liar; it sounds so strong, but figures don't lie, but liars figure. And what is chalked up as a success was a non-event.
You know, I cannot remember the exact name of the person because I was a kid. There was a kid that was missing, and someone in my neighborhood literally got accused, cuffed, put in the back of the car, and taken down the police station. And by the time he was booked, the kid was in the house the entire time.
Right? Yeah. And at least in that case, he wasn't. That was traumatic enough. I'm not saying it wasn't,
Yeah.
but at least in that case, his name wasn't broadcast all over the news.
Yeah. Well, luckily that was like 1988. And, things were still a little more regional
Yeah.
back then. This is what I was saying in the beginning. It's almost like, and you tell me if I'm way off with this. I always tell people, because they always say, it's the world's always going to hell, crime is up, everything's up. And we keep seeing statistically that all major crimes are down and steadily going down over the years. The problem is we just have more exposure to it now. When I was a kid in Miami, Florida, if someone shot two store owners in Green Bay, Wisconsin, I wouldn't hear about it. But now if that happens, it's on my phone instantly, it's on my TV, and now so we have
Well,
this.
you're right. Except I disagree a little bit, though. First off, yeah, you're right about people always have this perception that crime is always on the increase. Except that I would maintain that people were saying that even back in the old days, if you will, in
Mhm.
the days when we grew up. When I was growing up in the 60s and the 70s, people were saying, "Oh, crime is on the increase. Crime is going way up. Crime's out of control." And there's no such thing as a good level of crime. I understand that.
Right.
But as you say, overall, nationwide, all these qualifiers, crime has been steadily reducing since the 1990s. Now, we have to get into the question of how do you measure crime? How much is really out there? That's a separate issue. The uniform crime reports are crimes reported to police. That does not include all crimes that are actually committed.
Yeah,
The
because
National
all
Crime
crime.
Victimization Surveys survey crime victims to measure crime that way. But again, most indicators in most years, crime is going down. Now, that doesn't mean it's going down everywhere. There are some jurisdictions, I'm sure, where it is going up. All right. And sometimes that can be explained, sometimes really it can't. But
Well,
nationwide, year
mhm.
in, year out, crime is going down.
And that's because people look at it nationwide, but I look at it by region. You look at a place like New York. I grew up in Miami. I can tell you in the 80s and early 90s, since the 80s and early 90s, crime has gone down in Miami. I can
Yes.
I can tell you that from a visual without even looking up the statistics fact. Elizabeth, now this is something a little funny because I believe her. Elizabeth says, wish they would do away with the loud phone siren alerts. Always scares me. Right, you're at work and all of a sudden that loud siren, or when there's a warning or an Amber Alert, and it just comes out of nowhere and it can scare the hell out of you.
Who I can't have is that Elizabeth? What's the last name there?
Jones, Elizabeth
I've
Jones.
never heard of her.
Oh wait, last name's Jones. Is this person related to you? Is this a wife, a daughter? Who is
She doesn't claim me. She's probably high.
it? Oh, then me and her will get
I,
along.
I say that because she's a flight attendant. She probably really is high somewhere.
Oh, darn. Well, we'll
She
still
needs
get along.
she needs to get back to work.
But she is, I mean, Mark, that is funny that she said that because that thing comes out of nowhere and you could be carrying something and you'll drop it.
Well, look, she lives in Chicago, okay, and you
Uh-huh.
hear about
Talk
crime
about
is on the
crime.
increase in
Yeah.
Chicago, and in certain areas, I'm sure it is, but there's certain areas of Chicago where it's perfectly safe. Uh, so yeah, it does vary by according to where you at, and also it varies up and goes up and down, from year to year. So, but I don't buy the gloom and doom all the time. That's what
Lisette,
I'm
I
saying.
don't know if you're referring to what we were talking to or what Elizabeth was talking to. It says, so are you saying we shouldn't have the alert? Tell that to a parent whose child has really been.
No, Lisette, I didn't say that.
No, we didn't say that. And I think Elizabeth is talking about the siren that blasts out of nowhere and scares the bejesus out of half the people that are running around. But
You
no,
tell
but
Miss Miss
Mark,
Miss my
but
my
wait,
girl is my girl is set. We didn't say that. All I'm saying is that we just take these things with a grain of salt. Is all.
well,
And by
here's
the
the
way,
thing.
if there's one person that I will not travel with
Uh,
or that I will not dine with, it's
Lisette,
not because I don't like her. I love her.
uh,
But she has the worst luck at restaurants and stays in the worst places. And more things happen to her when she travels than anybody I know.
there's an Amber Alert for when she well, Rise Lisette, host of Rise with Lisette every other Monday on Keanu Productions. She has a new segment coming out, Mark. It's called Restaurant Stories. So
Oh
you'll
my
be glad to
Lord.
hear that. But what I want to go back to is look at what Lisette just said. Tell
All right.
that to a parent whose child has been abducted by a madman. You
All
see what
right.
she just said? Hold
Lisette.
on.
Look.
Wait, Mark. You see what she just said at the end? Abducted by a madman. And we just talked about that sometimes there's a man or a woman that because they're tired of waiting on the court system and they know their child is with the parent that they shouldn't be because of it's not a good living condition and they take it upon themselves to take them. Is that person a madman?
Look, Lisette, are you listening? Are you looking? Okay, good. All right. Of course, that's a terrible thing. However, what I'm saying is the Amber Alert system, in fact, the article that I've been referring to here, it says it more or less in quotes. Is it worth it if it saves one life? Now, a lot of people who are a bit critical of the Amber Alert system, they love their children as much as you and I do. What their argument is that the Amber Alert system really does not save lives.
I understand that. No, they're not. Okay, good.
By
We
the
weren't.
way, I love Lisette. By the way,
Oh,
just so
we
you
love
know,
her to death.
you can't
I
help you
like
can't help but love Lisette.
no, I like that she's commenting because comments bring conversation, right? There's already about four things I watched this episode, and there's still about four things you've said today that I still didn't know. I mean, it's not like I know everything. I don't. You've probably forgotten more things than I know about life, but
Well, that happens with age. You forget stuff and don't realize it. So. But I didn't know you were a fan of Columbo. I got to remember to if
well,
I
you got to remember I am 45, so I
well, but
did.
I'm not. No,
I,
no, it's not that I won't use it again. It's my secret weapon now. So.
I was a kid, that saw with his grandparents and parents watching. My grandmother loved Telly Savalas, so she watched Kojak, she watched Columbo, she watched Magnum PI, all those cop shows, Heart to Heart, Hunter. God, there's so many. She loved the Matlocks and the uh, Murder She Wrote, Simon and Simon.
Hey,
You
look!
know,
I guess we'll close with this, but I will tell you my favorite crime show and why.
uh-huh.
My favorite cop show. I think I've
Unsolved
told you before. My favorite cop
Blue
show was
Street Blues.
no,
Oh.
but you're in the right city. All right, was Barney Miller from the late
Ah,
'70s and early '80s. Okay, and you got your head down now in your hand because you know why I picked that show. It's because it stars my all-time favorite actor, the
Abe
one and
Pagoda.
only Abe Vigoda.
Oh my God! Why? How? It's been 2 years since I got an Abe Pagoda reference from you. And, um, bro, New York. I mean, NYPD Blue. Is that what it was? Wait, no. What was it? Was that right? No, Hill Street Blues
I
was
love
way
Hill
ahead.
Street Blues. Yeah,
Was way ahead of its time.
yeah.
Way ahead of its time. It was so edgy. That was the first cop show that would literally show you cops doing good things and cops doing not so good things. Because back then
Right.
you had to paint a picture, and Hill Street Blues wasn't afraid of showing you both sides of the coin, right?
And
Um,
they could do that so well because it was one of the few shows. Well, I said the few. one of the first
Mhm.
shows I remember that had a great ensemble cast, not just one or two
Mhm.
stars like Columbo or Kojak or something like that. And
But
look,
you have to. Ah, Chris McGuess. Chris is so silly. She said, "Can we ask questions about 19th century London?"
you want me to answer that? Okay, Chris,
She wants you to do
if you
Jack the
keep
Ripper.
tuning in, I'm planning on visiting London later this year, and I plan to do some videoing and do some crime stories from you said 19th century. Yes, 19th century London. We'll do one on Jack the Ripper. How about that?
He is, and Chris, he's right. He is going to London. We got some ones that'll be interesting. He's going to do isn't it the attempted assassination of the Pope? I
Pope
know you're.
John Paul II assassination attempt.
Mhm,
The Florence monster in Florence, Italy.
mhm.
I visited New York City in December, and we'll talk about the assassination of John Lennon.
Yes,
And
Chris.
Buffalo, New York, the assassination of President McKinley. New Jersey, the duel between
Mhm.
Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr,
All right,
and
don't give it all. Don't give away the farm, Chris. You can co-host because this was that show I told you I'd like you to co-host on when I got it started. Chris is a not I want to say huge fan, like she's a fangirl of Jack the Ripper, but she know she said co-chat. Now she's back down. She's taking it down in the co-chat. No, we got to get you on here audio wise. You don't have to be on camera, but what I was going to talk about when I talked about Hill Street Blues, well, it also has to be really good, right? You can do things at a time where it's taboo if it's done well.
yeah,
You know, if Hill Street Blues was a terrible show, you know, all those things would be pointed out. And you know how we talked about To Catch a Predator, how it painted a picture. The one thing show that was very popular, Cops, showed you that everybody that the cops run into contact with is in the wrong, like every single person. So it painted
yeah,
that picture. So I do love shows that know how to show. That's what attracted me. I watched Hill Street Blues in my 20s, not when I was a kid, when it was kind of still on, when I was younger. Um, but yeah, we've got a lot of great shows coming out, guys. Coming up, Black History Month is next month. Mark has two great cases that he's going to break down.
yeah.
And what are those cases, Mark?
Well, first off, and I have to ask you this, but we have
Mhm.
another episode in January, correct?
No,
No. Okay, I thought we had another one in January.
no.
Um, okay, the two cases for February, the Black History Month. Make sure I don't draw a blank here. I'm not sure in what order we're doing them, but we're going to
Uh,
do
I know we're doing the Scottsboro
okay. The
Boys.
Scottsboro Boys. In brief, that was something that happened back in the 1930s during the Great Depression, when nine young African American men were accused of raping two white women, and the whole story that came with that. And the other case is one that's not nearly as well known, at least to people outside North Carolina. It happened in 1870, just after the end of the Civil War, to the Reconstruction era, when a former constable, an African American man named Wyatt Outlaw, the wording there, the name there, the irony, if you will, was lynched by people by the KKK in Graham, North Carolina. So those are the two cases for February.
And we're going to go over both of those. So, everybody, please, if you have a case that you would like us to talk about, like Mark, we do a lot of these cases and he goes to the places that these cases happen. And sometimes we'll film. Well, I don't want to give away the magic, but if you have some cases that you would like for him to cover, go ahead and leave a comment. Not in the chat, but in the actual comments section, or you can email keoneproductions@gmail.com. That's keoneproductions@gmail.com and say, I would like this episode to be talked about on Crime Chronicles. We'll either do a video or we'll talk about that crime on this channel. And we'll be very happy to do that and let you know when it's coming out. Please make sure that you like and subscribe. It helps the channel out greatly. We're trying to get to these marks so we can have better productions. And like Chris just said, the Appalachian murders. I hope she puts that in the comments because I'll forget. So not the live chat people, please put it in the comments or email me. Or Chris, you have my phone number. Just text it to me, and I'll remember. So join us. And Mark, I was wrong. No, I wasn't wrong. Yeah, we're not going to do that one on the 31st. So we'll get two episodes in February, and we're going to come to you guys twice a month starting in February. This was a good premiere for this show. We're going to put the actual video by itself on later this month. Lisette says, great show, Mark. Thank you. Chris says she's will do. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And we'll see you next time on Crime Chronicles with Mark Jones.